welcome. Hello, welcome to the Long Beach Post conference room here at this noontime hour on a Tuesday. We're gathered here to have a debate. So we're going to be talking about the 4 charter amendments that are coming up for a vote on November 6th. That's 2 weeks from today, so make sure you're registered and you know where your polling place is. I want to thank our guests for coming. Thank you guys for joining us at lunch at noon on a Tuesday. We also want to thank our audience who's watching live on Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, Twitch, and YouTube. Make sure I get them all. And the video of today's debate will be on our website after the debate and will also be socialed out on our social channels. So even if you can't join us live, you'll still be able to watch the debate today. So there's a lot of drama in national politics. We know that. I think we can agree on that. It's not always constructive. Our goal today in having those in favor and those against the various charter amendments is to have a constructive dialogue to help voters make up their minds on November 6th. We're going to be talking about measures AAA, BBB, CCC, and DDD. I don't know why the triple letters, but that's the way it is. So these charter amendments will change what is essentially the city's constitution. This is the charter document that guides every aspect of local government. So it's a big deal. Before we get started, I'd like to formally introduce our guests. We have City Auditor Laura Doud joining us. And we have Mayor Robert Garcia.
Thank you.
Laura was first elected in 2006, is now in her 4th term, and Mayor Garcia is serving his 2nd term, just started his 2nd.
Just started.
And we have former Councilwoman Rae Gabelich, who served from 2004 to 2012 for the 8th District. And we have Corliss Lee, who's been an activist here in Long Beach for many years and ran for the 5th District last spring. So thank you guys for joining us. We're going to jump right in. We're going to get started. We're going to keep this to an hour. Just a few words, though, on the ground rules. We've already warned the guests. We're going to be very strict about time. So we have a buzzer here to indicate when time is up. Each side will have 2 minutes to respond to the first question on each measure. And thereafter, we'll have a 30-second response as well from the opposing side. And then thereafter, each side will get a minute to respond with a 30-second response. What else? We are also taking live questions from our virtual audience. So if you're watching us live on Facebook, Twitter, please send us questions. We have our team in the newsroom calling those questions, and they're going to be patching them into me live. So please send us your questions. We want to know what you want to know. I think that's it. With that, we're going to dive into Measure A. We're going to go in order, and we did a coin toss to start, and the opposing side is going to begin first, or no. The supporters are going to start first. So Measure AAA, and I'm going to summarize this very simply. It affects the powers of the city auditor, which is an elected position here in Long Beach. Very simply, this measure will give the auditor's office the ability to conduct performance reviews in addition to financial audits. So Laura, tell me what I left out. Tell us why you support this measure.
Well, thank you very much. It's a privilege to be with all of you here today. Measure AAA, it empowers and strengthens the city auditor's authority to conduct performance audits, to amend the charter so that it will explicitly state that the city auditor has the power and authority to conduct performance audits, and explicitly state that we will have access to all city documents in order to conduct those performance audits. Right now, we know we're dealing with a charter that's over 100 years old. And so back in the day, audits were really focused on city finances, and the auditor was had access to financial documents. But the profession has evolved, and we conduct performance audits, and we need access to all records so that we can conduct those performance audits. So very simply, this charter amendment does two things. It explicitly gives us the authority to conduct the performance audit, and it explicitly gives us the authority to access the documents that we need. By not stating that, by not allowing it, the charter is ambiguous. It leaves room for misinterpretation, confusion, disputes, potential disputes. So this is really to clear it up. I might make note that the charter does require the city auditor to be a certified public accountant. I have a duty to keep the city current with the profession, with my knowledge and training and experience. This is my duty to bring, to update, to modernize, to keep our charter current with the industry and with the powers auditors need to do their jobs. So there's no risk of leaving something out or missing something. And I have a duty to do that, and I'm thankful for this opportunity to be here and explain that to the voters.
Thank you. And you guys will have 30 seconds to respond.
I'm Corliss Lee, and I'm from the Long Beach Reform Coalition. Also in my history is the fact that I have been in charge of compliance audits at 3 major aerospace companies. So this is not a new topic to me. What we see as being the problems with AAA is, number one, it appears just to be covered for the fact that the city would like to have term limits extended from 3 to 2. We're looking at these other additional measures as being smokescreen. But to specifically look into this one, what we have lost with Measure AAA is some wording that's very important. We have currently the ability to get immediate access to documentation. That has been changed to timely. Immediate is important when you have a situation where there is going to be a charge of corruption, a charge of breaking a law. You need to be able to walk in the door and tell them, I need these documents now. If you give them time, if you use the word timely, those documents could disappear. They could be changed.
And so your 30-second response is up, but
I think they get 2 minutes first.
no, they get 30 seconds to respond, and then. But I'm going to ask you a question though that you can just continue. So tell us why you're opposed.
Well, the second reason that I'm opposed to this, besides the wording issue, is that there's a big missing piece here. And that's, I've looked through that charter and there's no requirement for corrective action. What is the point of doing an audit if you don't have rules in place that require those departments to do a corrective action plan, give you a schedule, and then you go back and validate that those problems are cleaned up? That is a gaping hole in the charter.
Okay.
I think, do I have a minute?
Sure.
Okay.
You guys can.
I think that I've had the opportunity to talk to you about that, Laura, in the past, about some of the audits that you've done and presented to the City Council. And you make great presentations, but then what they do with them is really up to them, and they're, like Corliss said, there's no follow-through on it. So I think that is something that you should be looking at, as opposed to, I believe that what you're doing really is giving up power that you have and that you should need for the job that you're elected to do.
Well, thank you. Thank you for your concerns and over our audits and for your concerns over timely. But I just want to say, have you ever heard someone emphasize the wrong syllable? Because I really think that you're emphasizing the wrong thing. This isn't about the word timely and immediate. In law school, we were told that, like, timely is according to the reasonable, prudent person. I'm a reasonable, prudent auditor. We will make sure that the documents are given to the city in a reasonable time. There is no smokescreen here. The meat and potatoes of AAA is about access. We need access to documents to do our job. And you're right, we do need to implement the recommendations, and we will. But in order to get those recommendations, we need access to documents. And that's what this measure is about.
I'm going to stop you there, but I'm going to ask you a question along those lines. It's related to this languaging issue. So the language in the charters is being changed to timely instead of immediate. Mm-hmm. Why make that change? It seems a bit distracting.
Yeah, I think we realize that it takes time and effort for city department staff to get the documents that we're requesting. There have been budget cuts and there has been major staff reductions. So when we're asking for something, I have always given staff reasonable time to provide the documents. And if it's not reasonable, trust me, we are at the city manager's doorstep knocking. Mm-hmm. And if not the city managers, the mayors.
And I think it's important. I mean, I have seen the audits come through and the auditor have a difficult time getting documents and records from staff members. That's unacceptable. The city charter does not authorize the city auditor to do performance audits. Currently, she does them because she actually pushes management. I have to step in and say, guys, why aren't you getting the documents over to the city auditor? That's unacceptable. Either the city auditor should do performance audits or not. And if we're going to have a system that's really about checks and balances, we have, in my opinion, the most independent person in the entire city is the person I'm sitting next to. And she has said we need to have access to all documents at all times, which is not explicit in the current charter.
And just a quick reminder too, or not reminder, but if you guys could all speak at about the level that Mayor Garcia was just speaking. So just speak up a little bit, raise your voice, just so our live audience can hear.
You know, one of the things, and you just said it, Robert, that she should be the most independent person in the city. And I think joining this effort, joining these measures makes you less independent. So I'm disappointed that you chose to do that. But I do respect the work that you do. My concern, again, as Corliss mentioned earlier, is there have been audits that you've done that the city doesn't pay attention to. I think that that's where your office is the weakest. And as far as having, you have performance auditors on staff. The last audit that you did on the animal, with the review on the animal, don't know what the name of it was.
Animal care.
And your time
you had
is
4 performance
your
auditors.
time is up now. And just you'll have a. We'll be talking about this more, I'm sure. Okay. But for you guys, the city auditor is an elected position.
Correct.
She is the independent. She's elected by voters. Don't you want the city editor to be, or the city auditor to be able to do performance audits? I mean, isn't that a good thing?
Absolutely.
So why the opposition then to?
The opposition is not to performance audits. They're doing those today, and I think they're doing a good job of them. I've read some of the audit reports. The problem is what you're losing in this document. The problem is that you're weakening it by changing that wording, from immediate to timely. You negotiate from a position of power when you can say, I need that immediately. You can always loosen it up. When you start with timely, you're giving up your power.
Why would she be in favor of it, though?
Oh.
That's a question for her.
Again, emphasizing the wrong syllable is distracting to the voters. It's really misleading and a disservice to the voters when you're trying to distract voters from the real issue. That, like I mentioned, this is all about access to documents. We have had challenges in the past when documents are not provided to us and it raises to the level of the city auditor and the mayor, there's a problem. This is about going forward and for the future city auditors, that there is explicit, clear, crystal clear language that we have the power to do performance audits, that we have the power to access the documents that we need so we can make the recommendations needed and implement them so we can make this wonderful city that we all care very much about a better place to live. And I'm very passionate about this, and I appreciate your comment about implementation because we do follow up audits to implement these recommendations. And even though I'm the city auditor, I still have a voice as a citizen to support good government measures that I believe in, that I believe will help make this community and the city that we love better.
So question for you. These 4 measures are being packaged together as a group. Do you feel like your independence has been compromised because you're campaigning, in a sense, with the mayor and with the yes side?
No, absolutely not. I believe in these measures. I believe they're good government measures. I believe they will make our community better. And as we go through them, I'd be happy to speak on each one of them.
Let me add one thing. I think it's important. I think it's also unfair to try to silence somebody's voice. We don't agree on everything. In fact, many audits that come out where the auditors are saying we should do this, and we're like, oh, okay, we got to do this better, or what about that? And so naturally, our two positions are set up within the charter to be a check and balance on each other. And the system we have now on auditing is broken, and thankfully, we're pushing to get the information that she needs. But to say that she doesn't have a voice or is not allowed to give an opinion, I think is wrong and disingenuous. And I think that I am grateful that the auditor's office has said we need to have this full access, and we're pushing. There's a reason why, by the way, why the city management is also probably not crazy about this measure, because it really opens up them as well.
Thank you, and I'm gonna need you guys to get closer to the mic and speak as loud as you can. We're having trouble hearing you.
Okay, if you want to talk
So 30
about
seconds to respond.
auditor independence, I was really disappointed when I saw you come out as a politician, when I see you line up with the people that you're supposed to be auditing. I think that that takes away your ability to have autonomy. Secondly, when I look at the accusations that are coming out in the media that say that this is a poorly worded BBB, it's misleading. We feel it was done intentionally to confuse voters. You should be on board being the person behind the scenes to make sure that that didn't happen, not be out front supporting it.
Right, and when we get to BBB, I'll be happy to explain why I support BBB.
And your response time is over. So I want to take a viewer question before we leave this measure. We have a question from Berta on Facebook. Doesn't the city auditor already conduct performance audits, and doesn't this confuse the voter rather than clarify the auditor's role?
Great question. And we are conducting performance audits currently. There's a disconnect between what we're actually doing today and our 100-year-old charter. So it's my duty as a CPA, as the elected city auditor, to bring Long Beach up to the 21st century and update our city charter so it matches what we're doing today and what we plan to do for the future. And it's explicit and it's clear.
And let me say again that I will reemphasize that. Oftentimes, I get a call from Laura saying, Department X is not getting us the records that we need, or Department X is not working with us at the audit. That's unacceptable. So what happens? I get on the phone, I'm calling the city manager, I'm calling the department head, and I'm saying, what is going on? Why aren't we getting the documents over? Right now, the city staff can turn to the charter today and say, you can't do this audit. But because we push and push hard, she's able to get them done. We've got to modernize the city charter. This is common sense, good government, and we're happy to support it.
You know, what I'd like to say, and earlier you had said, Laura, that this was distracting, that the arguments against these measures is distracting to the voter. But the reality is we're here to help educate the voters. I believe that all three of the other measures are a distraction to getting an additional term for those that are seated there today. That, I believe, is the main distraction. So, to watch you sacrifice your integrity, and I've worked with you for many years, I think is a disservice to the community.
We're having trouble hearing you guys.
I'm certainly not sacrificing my integrity by standing up for what this city believes. I feel this is my mission, my calling at this time, at this place, to clarify the city charter and what duties the city auditor needs to do, the authority that the city auditor needs for the future. I'm standing up and being a voice to clarify so that we will no longer have the pushback when we need access to documents. Just to reiterate, this whole measure.
We need to stop there, sorry. I want to be fair. And I wish we had more time to talk more about this particular, but we have to move on so we get to all of them. We're going to turn to BBB, which is probably the one that we got the most questions about. And I'm going to give each side a chance to summarize it and talk about exactly what it would do. But the short version is that this measure would change term limits in the city. So it would do away with the write-in system and allow elected council members and the mayor to serve 3 full terms, and that's it. So we started with you guys the first time, right?
No,
I'm sorry. I keep getting this wrong. So we're going to start with you guys on BBB.
Okay.
So go ahead.
Well, I'd love to take the lead on that.
And you have 2 minutes, by the way.
Okay. I, as most of you know, I served 2 full terms, and I did have the option of doing a write-in, but I decided that my public service days were numbered, and I'd done my turn, and it was time for someone else to come on board. So I think that the same is true today. And earlier you had said that that we were against all these measures, but I think that's not the appropriate word. I would say I'm opposed to the process that has gone on to get us here, not necessarily about the content of the measures. Some of them are good. This one I don't think is good. In one of the earlier publications, it might have been an interview that was done, they referred to, actually it's in the voting book, and it says that we are the only U.S. city that has term limits with write-in opportunity. Well, that might be very, very true, but I did a little bit of homework, and what I found is that of the major cities across the country, Miami Beach and Phoenix have 3 2-year terms. Council gets 2 4-year terms. Seattle and Atlanta, the mayor has no term limits. The council has 2 4-year terms. San Francisco, the mayor can run 2 successive 4-year terms. They call them supervisors for council members. They have 2 successive 4-year terms. San Antonio, 2 2-year terms for the mayor and the council. Nashville, they rejected, in 2008, they rejected a 3rd term, and the mayor and council get 2 4-year terms. The only 2 cities that I found no term limits were Portland and Denver. So they're saying that, that we are out of the norm, and that most people, how I interpreted that was that most people had a 3rd term, but that really is not appropriate. It's misleading, I think, to the public. The way that we did it today, the way in 2007, when the voters voted again on it, they approved, they denied by 67%, I believe, to allow 3 terms, and then they picked the alternative, which was to allow for a write-in. So if you are doing just the greatest job and your community loves you, they'll re-elect you in the way that they chose. And I say, I feel like.
30 seconds.
Is this 30 or 2 minutes? I'm
It's
sorry.
kind of awkward. I should have done this differently.
No,
You
it's
have-
okay.
you technically have 30 seconds to respond, and then basically the same question.
Well-
What would this measure do?
Thank you. I want to first just start by saying, all these measures, you don't just have to take our word for it. America's leading good government group, Common Cause, has said of all 4 of these measures that this is the most comprehensive reform package we've seen at the local level, and these proposals represent a step forwards towards strong good governance in the city of Long Beach. We should be clear about the system that we actually have today when it comes to term limits. A candidate today can run for 2, 3, 4, or 10 terms. The first 2 are on the ballot, and then you can run not just as a write-in candidate, but you can actually get written in, and then your name appears on the ballot. And so today, we're trying to limit terms for the council and the mayor.
I should have done this differently.
No, it's okay.
Your time on the response is over, but same question. What would this measure do, and why do you support it?
Thank you. So let's first talk about, I think facts are important, and I think it's really important to talk about what this does. It's very clear. You can read it in the sample ballot. You can read it when you go and read the impartial analysis of the city attorney, which says the following. The charter currently provides no limit on the number of times a candidate may run as a write-in, and further provides that the name of the write-in candidate who has been nominated at the primary election shall appear on the ballot for the general election. So a candidate today, let's be clear, can serve 2, 3, 5, or 10 terms. What the measure tries to do is limit the amount of terms to 3, which, by the way, aligns with the state of California, and it aligns with the county of Los Angeles, and even the city of Los Angeles, in what limits should be. So the question is do we actually want fair and firm term limits, which sets the number at 12, or do we think candidates should be allowed to run indefinitely in a system, by the way, that benefits those that can actually navigate the voting system? And we can talk about that a little bit later, but I think it's really important to note that this is a good government measure, part of a package of good government measures.
And something is wrong with your mic, so I'm
Okay.
going to have to pass the mic back and forth. But you guys
You mean you can't hear anything we've said?
Well, you can. It's just hard to hear.
Do we get a do-over?
No, well, it's just hard to hear. So you can, but the sound isn't what we want. So you have 30 seconds to respond, and then I have a question for you
Well,
guys.
I believe, Robert, that we have the gold standard for keeping good representation alive and well in our city. And it lessens the indebtedness and the cronyism that you can see when people stay in office for too long. I don't think it makes one bit of difference if we are in line with other state elected offices. In fact, I'd like to hear from you why you think that's important. You may interact with them, but certainly the council has very little, the policies that they set are not necessarily run by what the state or the county is proposing. So I think that's being disingenuous. And what's even more disingenuous is that if you had added, or what would have made this less disingenuous and not asking for a third term is if you had added from all elected officials after November 6th, 2018. That would have been fair.
Okay, thank you.
Mm-hmm.
And I have a question for you guys.
Yes.
So this does align with what the state has and what other cities have. If a politician is doing a good job, shouldn't they be allowed to serve more terms? So my question is, isn't that the power of the voter, to vote bad people out of office if they're not doing a good job?
It is, but if you look at the incumbents have a lead over anybody that's running against them. In fact, I will share with you that Matthew, your partner, did a paper and just recently, and his paper didn't suggest, it stated that 80 to 90% of incumbents are reelected. So not only that, if you have an ethnic issue going on, they're going to vote for the people that they feel closest to, usually after the party is usually the first reason. But the way that this has been set up, I think, is disingenuous to the people. I think they have an opportunity to go for a third or a fourth or a fifth term if they so desire. But in 26 years, we've only had 6 people that have tried to do the write-in, and only 3 of them were successful. So yes, they have a vote, but it levels the playing field so that the people that are sitting there, the incumbents, don't have the union support, don't have the union money, don't have the big developer money. If you look at who sponsored, who paid to support these measures, 6 developers from outside of the city, the police union, and others. Thank you.
So you guys have 30 seconds to respond.
I'll just say that, I'm glad that you brought up my partner. My partner is one of the smartest, most independent, most handsome people I've ever met. And he's written a lot of wonderful journal articles and is a very successful professor that's tenured. He voted for all of these measures, actually. And what his papers will also tell you, and what his research will tell you, is that it's better to make voting easier, not harder. And we have a situation today where people that speak Khmer, people that speak Spanish, people that are newer and younger voters have a harder time navigating this process than would a straight process of actually having the name on the ballot. That is true. That is why almost all the major civil rights organizations in the city of Long Beach support BBB, and I look forward to talking about that.
So my next question is for you guys. This question is represented by a lot of questions that we got ahead of time. If the intent of the measure is to fix the loophole where a candidate could potentially run for an unlimited number of write-in terms, then why not just fix that loophole? Why not just say you can only run 1 term as a write-in?
I think that's a great question. So let me answer that. There's a reason why the civil rights leadership of this city support BBB. We're talking about the Southern Christian Leadership Conference, numerous pastors, Cambodians for Equity, many churches. Because the system we have today benefits those that can navigate a write-in process indefinitely. Either we support making voting easier, or we support making it harder. If I'm someone that didn't earn the right to vote until I was 21 years old, I still help my family vote. A write-in process that you can do indefinitely benefits only certain communities. So if you support voting and civil rights, and you think that a Khmer-speaking person whose language is completely different than English is going to have the same equity at the ballot box in the system we have. That is just incorrect. So I completely agree and support the civil rights community, the Cambodians for Equity, and so many others that support this, because we have to create a system that is more fair. So we can continue to have a system where we can make voting harder, but I'm always on the side that makes voting easier.
Okay. And I think it's actually going to be easier if we just take this microphone out, if you guys wouldn't mind holding it. So you have 30 seconds to respond.
Okay, so making this a civil rights issue is terribly wrong, in my opinion. I think we have a problem in the city of Long Beach with voter, not suppression, but people just apathy. They just don't come out and vote. Now, putting your efforts into getting people to come out and vote, and I think you did a great job getting, I think, over 700 young people by going to the high schools to get them to vote and be part of their community. That's a great thing. But to say that that this is a civil rights issue, I think, is terribly wrong. What I would like to share with people, oh, it's up.
It's only 30
okay,
seconds,
next time.
So the next question is actually for you guys. So I'm going to leave the mic over here. If it seems like Long Beach has had very low voter turnout, and we agonize over this in the media every election night because we get really excited. It's election night and no one shows up. Wouldn't it be better to spend your efforts getting more people to vote? I mean, isn't that the power of...
I agree with that. It would be better to get more to work on getting more people to vote, as opposed to trying to get a third term for the mayor and the seated council. You know, I'd like to comment or read to you the quote that I got from Assemblymember Patrick O'Donnell, who served on the city council. He was elected to a third term. He says there was no loophole. The write-in option was never a loophole, as the mailers have stated. In fact, it was approved by the voters at the same time term limits were put into place. To claim anything different is a fabrication and appears to be an attempt to confuse voters into favoring the measure. This is unfortunate. Simply put, we can do better, and the best way to do this is to be above board and remain honest with the voters. I just recently received a quote also from former 3rd District Council member Gary DeLong. It appears to me that Measure BBB benefits our existing elected officials and past elected officials by giving them one more term. If voters love their council member and can't live without them, we have an existing solution. It's called write-in ballots. And then we also have, my time is up.
Thank you.
Sorry.
I'm going to give you guys 30 seconds to respond.
I appreciate the those that traditionally can actually access the ballot process, but I want to talk about the communities that actually can't. This is what the civil rights leaders of our community said. Measure BBB is a proactive step in ensuring voting is simpler, easier, and fair to everyone. Measure BBB greatly simplifies a complex voting process in Long Beach by eliminating a confusing write-in process that disproportionately impacts voters who are non-English speaking or have limited English proficiency. So I appreciate that everyone at the table is proficient in English. Spanish is my first language, and this is unfair to people that are monolingual Spanish and Khmer speakers. And so there's a level of privilege to those that can actually access the voting process a certain way, but the voting process we have now is unfair, and we're trying to change it.
And we're going to do one more question on this topic, and unfortunately then we have to move along right when we're getting going. But the last question for you, if you could respond to Assemblyman O'Donnell's statement that about the what he was talking about was the campaign materials for this measure being misleading. If you could respond to that.
Sure. First of all, I just saw Pat a couple of days ago. I love Pat. We're good friends, and people can have different opinions on things. But those that are supporting this measure include myself, former Mayor Bob Foster, former Mayor Beverly O'Neill, who was elected 3 terms, many of the members of the City Council, Common Cause, our City Auditor Laura Doud, the actual Speaker of the Assembly that runs the legislature, Anthony Rendon, who's one of our Assembly members, our state senator that represents Long Beach, civil rights leaders up and down Long Beach. And so people are allowed to have different opinions, by the way. There's nothing wrong with that. What we're trying to do is we're trying to ensure that we make voting easier. If you support actually a simplified, easier process, the BBB is simple, it's straightforward, and makes sense. In fact, all 4 of these measures, in our opinion, are simple and straightforward. And so we're really excited about all four. We really think that they're going to make our government even better. I'm always going to stand up for the people that have the hardest time at the voting box. And I think that this is an example of how to help them.
Okay. And you have 30 seconds to respond.
I love you, Robert, but I think you're disingenuous on this one. I'm sorry. You know, the other people that have agreed that this is a bad measure, that say no on BBB, Assemblymember Patrick O'Donnell, 3rd District Councilmember Susie Price, 3rd District Gary DeLong, 3rd District Doug Drummond, 5th District Jerry Shipsky, 8th District Jeff Kellogg, and of course myself, along with CARP, LB Hush 2, Eastside Voice, Kono, LB Neighborhoods First, People of Long Beach, Los Altos Can, and the LB Taxpayers Association. We have not received funding to argue this point from any organization or any union, but from 154 Long Beach residents, and 99% of those donations came from Long Beach citizens.
All right, thank you. We're going to have to move along to CCC, which is establishing an ethics commission here in Long Beach. And that's pretty much what it is. This commission would look at campaign finance, conflicts of interest, lobbying, influence, and other items. So I believe you guys start, correct? So if you could tell us why you support this measure.
The Ethics Commission will be a 7-member commission to, again, promote good government, promote ethics in government, to monitor the campaign financing laws, the lobby ordinances. I'm certainly looking forward to working with this Ethics Commission to fight fraud, waste, and abuse among our government, and I support this Ethics Commission.
And I agree. I think you know, Long Beach is one of the only cities in California, the larger cities, that doesn't have an ethics commission. We need one. It's just good government, and I think when you talk to good government groups like Common Cause, that supports all four. They think that this is a really strong measure. I think they say Measure CCC will strengthen public trust in government by creating an ethics commission to ensure that Long Beach's campaign finance and anti-corruption laws are respected. This is a common practice. Los Angeles, Oakland, Sacramento, San Jose, and San Diego all have ethics commissions, and we believe this is just another good government measure, and we look forward to it being passed by the voters.
All right, thank you guys, and you have 30 seconds to respond, and then basically the same question to you. Why would you be opposed to an ethics commission?
Well, I have to say that at the heart of ethics is a concern for something or someone other than ourselves. And if that were the case in these measures, I believe this is, again, a smokescreen for BBB. I do believe in an ethics commission. Certainly Bonnie Lowenthal tried to bring it forward, as did Jerry Shipsky when they served on the council. It really didn't go very far, and the voters voted again in 2007, and it didn't pass there because it was paired with other issues. But Al Austin brought it to the council last November 2017, and he asked for the report to be back in 30 days. On the floor, it was changed to 60 to 90 days, and I don't believe it ever came back. It didn't come back to the public until June of this year when it came in the form of a ballot measure. That is disingenuous.
And your time is up, just so we can restart the clock. The same question to you, though. Why are you opposed to this measure?
Well, no one's actually opposed to ethics, but in this particular measure, there's no real power. What it does is it says to provide support to make recommendations to assist departments in, to advocate for understanding of, to develop an educational program. There's no subpoena power, and you cannot launch an investigation. Once again, this is a problem of it being a cover for BBB. And how this commission is chosen is the other issue. The mayor and the city auditor choose the bulk of the commission. It's politically driven choices. So I don't see this ethics commission as being more than window dressing.
Thank you. And that was 30 seconds. Okay, losing track here. So for you guys, actually you do get 30 seconds to respond.
what Corliss mentioned about the Ethics Commission doing, I think are all wonderful things as another layer of ethics in our government. It will be a public meeting where these issues will be addressed publicly. And so I don't see how anyone could be opposed to more ethics and more oversight to ensure that public officials and elected officials are being held to the highest standards. And if you have a problem with it, it will be addressed publicly. Regarding
and your time is up, but I have a question for you now, similar along those lines. The point was brought up that this is maybe a cover for BBB. And my question is related to that, which is, why now? Did something happen? Is there some specific reason for this now?
Sure. I think it's so disingenuous, and it's really unfortunate to diminish the work that has gone into the community organizing, whether it's on Measure DDD, whether it's on folks that have spoken, where it's Bonnie Lowenthal, who has endorsed Measure CCC, who is the original person that brought forward the idea of creating an ethics commission. She signed the ballot argument to support this. And so I just think I know that the opposition is clearly obsessed with one of the measures, and that's okay. But we have 4 good government measures. We are proud that CCC will create an ethics commission in Long Beach for the first time. We're proud that it's supported by Bonnie Lowenthal, who is the person that actually came up with the idea when she was on the city council. We are also excited that the coalition that's supporting it is broad, diverse, and represents cross-sections of the entire city. And I think that to say that work that's happened, including the work that Councilman Al Austin has done to get this issue in front of the council and adopted, is unfortunate. There's a lot of hard work that has gone into this. This is a good measure, and we look forward to it passing.
Okay. And you guys have 30 seconds to respond.
I was actually not criticizing Councilmember Austin, but complimenting him on bringing it forward. I think it was something that should have been discussed more publicly. And in fact, what's the need for it to be a charter commission? Initially, the writing that you had shared with the public, I believe it was in June, it had the mayor electing all 7 positions. That is certainly being influenced by politics. And the points that Corliss made earlier, all of them are at the discretion of the city council. They make presentations, they make their reports to the city council, but approval or enforcement is all at the discretion of the city council.
All right, and I'm going to ask a question that we got ahead of time in the last week regarding this measure, which was, how would Measure CCC affect lobbying registration and the way lobbyists interact with City Hall?
Sure. Well, as one of the actual authors when I was on the council of the lobbying ordinance that we currently have in the lobbying registration, CCC clearly states they would have authority to look at and work with different parts of our government. That includes the lobbying ordinance. It would include campaign finance laws. It would include obviously public ethics. And just to comment on what was said about the teeth, in this measure, the commission is allowed to provide reports, to investigate, to have public hearings on an issue, and then forward those recommendations to the appropriate enforcement authority, whether that's the FPPC, whether that's the Attorney General, whether that is the DA. That is in place. Also, as Councilwoman Gabelich mentioned as well, this measure has been discussed for a long time. So we're really proud of it. We're really proud of the community supporters that are supporting it, and we feel pretty confident that the voters are going to adopt it. We also know that the supporters on this issue is enormous, and so we're proud of that.
Thank you. And you guys have 30 seconds to respond.
I guess I just want to make very clear that I'm not opposed to an ethics commission. I don't see the reason for making it a charter commission initially. I think that everything has its issues or problems that you want to make corrections as you go along the way. So I think that this is really unnecessary. Again, I think it's cover for BBB. That's my opinion. Do you have anything you'd like to add to that?
Just once again, there's no real power in this. It's a good start, but there's no real power.
All right, thank you. And we're already at 12:45, so we have to move right along to DDD, which, again, I wish we had more time to talk more in depth on each of these, but so DDD would establish a redistricting commission. We're coming up on the 2020 census, and this commission would look at how each of the 9 council districts, how the population is distributed. So I believe we start with you. So tell us what your thoughts are on DDD.
Well, I personally had a very difficult time in 2010 when we redistricted. We had Mayor Foster and several of his council members that came after primarily the 8th District, along with James Johnson, and it tore my community apart. To this day, there are people that in the 8th District along the Las Cerritas neighborhood area that are very upset that it happened. They call themselves the SOBs, the South of Bixby's. And, you know, my message to them is go back and talk to your council members because they can change it. They can change it every 5 years. But I think, again, I'm not going to say it again, but I believe that the Cambodians were used and misled in this effort. I think that Common Cause saw it. They lost their leader. In the 2010 census update, it shows that yes, we still have a strong Cambodian community, but it's not as it was. At one time, we had the largest Cambodian community in the United States. Outside of Cambodia, we had 50,000. Today, according to the census, we have 17,000 here today, with 52% of them in the 6th district. So if those figures are accurate, I had nothing to do with them, I looked them up, then it's very disingenuous to say that they don't have a leader. And the other fact is if you are going to try to create a district, a Cambodian district, and there are only 17,000, each district is approximately 50,000 people. And it wouldn't just impact, I don't know, is it 2 and 3 and 4? It would affect every district in the city. So you've got a long process that would be required to make these adjustments, and I think that the Cambodian community has been misled in their efforts.
So you have 30 seconds to respond, and then...
I think it's so disrespectful to say that the Cambodian community has been used and that they cannot make up their own minds or their own decisions. You said that they've been used, Councilwoman. And I will tell you that having been and knowing many Cambodian people, many of whom are refugees, many of whom have fled genocide in their own country, to say that they cannot organize on their own as a group, which they have through Cambodians for Equity and many others, to support, organize, get signatures, and come to the council and advocate on this, quite frankly, is appalling that you said that. And so our Cambodian community, by the way, is also undercounted because many of them can't speak English and are monolingual Khmer speakers.
And the same question to you. Why do you support this measure? What is the reason behind this measure?
The reason behind this measure is because I, like Councilwoman Gabelich, went through a redistricting process when I was on the council. And the one thing that I learned going through a redistricting process is that politicians should not do their own districts. We have a gerrymandered council district system. The truth is that this measure would likely not affect most of the city. Most of the city is landlocked because of our surrounding community. But what I believe is we're on the verge of some major voting rights infringements with the gerrymandering that has happened in the past in our council district. Is it okay to carve up our Cambodian community into many districts? Is it okay that Wrigley is divided into 2 districts? Is it okay that parts of Bixby Knolls and parts of West Long Beach cut all the way to the other side of town and then connect with parts of Bixby Highlands? That's not okay. This measure is simple. It's got a great coalition behind it, including the League of Women Voters, including Common Cause. And I want to read very, very simply. This commission would have 13 commissioners. 1 from each city council district would be selected from a qualified pool of applicants, and then that group would add commissioners. This is being called by Common Cause as one of the strongest independent local redistricting commissions in the nation. They view this will be a gold standard. Congressman Alan Lowenthal strongly supports this measure and wrote the rebuttal to the opponents because he wrote and created a similar measure statewide up and down the state of California. And I will say this one more time because I think it's important. Our Cambodian community should be respected, and their work should not be devalued by the opponents. And so I'm very proud to stand with Cambodians for Equity, as well as many of the Latino organizations and the civil rights leaders that have also endorsed DDD, because they know that it's easier and it unites communities.
You have 30 seconds to respond.
Shame on you, Robert. I never said anything about speaking up against the Cambodians, and I think you know that. I supported them the entire time I was on the council, and in fact encouraged them to find a leader to run. So you are at this point being disingenuous. But I will say that I spoke with Congressman Lowenthal just a couple of days ago about this, and I agree with a redistricting commission. I don't necessarily believe that it has to be in the charter because I think it's going to take a while to work it out. And when I spoke with Alan about this, he said he worked specifically on state redistricting from 2002 to 2006.
So your time is up, but I'll ask you a question related to and it's your turn, so keep that.
Okay.
So you don't believe this should be a charter commission?
I think once you put it in the charter, it's very difficult to change anything. So I think you could start with a redistricting commission laid out just the way that it's laid out and work through whatever the issues are to make it really smooth working for the public so it's effective. I do have a few problems with how it's written, and the primary problem that I have is that it says that an individual that is on the commission cannot run for any elected office for 10 years from the time that they serve on that commission. Well, I didn't know in 1994 that I wanted to be a council person in 2004. So I think there's some work that needs to be done to make it strong across the board for everyone. And again, the governor put the redistricting on the state ballot in 2008 after Alan Lowenthal's work on it for those 4 years. And they worked for 6 years to reach consensus on doing it the right way. So I think just out of the gate, putting this on there and saying, let's do it, I think that's the wrong way to do it.
Okay. Response?
Sure. I mean, it's on the tape. You said the community was used, and so I just want to reject that. And Councilwoman, that's what you said. And so I want to go back to what DDD actually does. Measure DDD is an independent citizens redistricting commission made up of members from all 9 city council districts. It would remove the ability for council members to district their own districts. And unfortunately, what the councilwoman mentioned is not possible. The charter explicitly gives the power currently today to redistricting to the city council. I don't think that's right. And I think that we should follow the state process laid out by Congressman Alan Lowenthal, advocated for by so many civil rights and voting rights organizations in our city, that don't have the same ability to advocate and to be in communities that are together. And so Measure DDD is not just about the Cambodian community, even though they're strong advocates. This is about uniting communities like Wrigley. It's about uniting communities like West Long Beach. It's about, I'm not sure if everyone's ever looked at the center of the city and how some of our districts are drawn. It should not be done by elected officials.
And the next question's for you. Coming back to the Cambodian community issue, we did get a couple questions ahead of time on this particular topic, and some wanted to know why only one community was consulted in this process, and I'm assuming they mean the Cambodian community. So can you address that?
Yeah, I mean, that's not true. I have a letter in front of me signed by many African-American leaders. Latino leaders have come out in favor of this. All leaders, I mean, regardless of color, I think, City Auditor, did you want to add why you support this measure as well?
Yes, I believe it's a good thing to have independent people throughout our city involved in the process. And, you know, when you talk about having authority to do something, this redistricting commission will have the authority to do something that the council cannot override. So I think anytime we can get the people involved in the process, good qualified people with this process that has been well thought out, it's a good thing. So I support that as well.
And you guys have 30 seconds to respond.
I agree it's a good thing. I just don't agree with the details that are in the measure. And some of those, such as you can't have held a public office or worked in an office for an elected official for 8 years prior. Now, having it be as independent as possible, nor can you hold an office for 10 years into the future. Nobody can read the crystal ball. So that's my concern. I think there are some issues within the measure that could be adjusted. And so I think that if we're being totally honest, it would be better to have it drawn as a commission outside of the charter, work on it for a while, just as they did at the state. And at the state level, when you said independent, they started with the most independent. They didn't pick, it couldn't be a leader of a party, it couldn't be Republican, Democrat, so they picked the city auditor, or the state auditor, and he oversaw how they brought those people together. So I think we need to look at something like that format.
All right, so we're at 12:55. So I'd like to give each side 1 minute to wrap up. We've crammed a lot into an hour. If you want to talk about DDD additionally, you're welcome to do that, or if you want to talk generally about all four, you're welcome to do that. I'll give each side 1 minute.
This is just a 1 minute closing?
Just kind of a 1 minute closing. Okay. Who would like to go first? For each
person or each side?
For each side.
Okay, go ahead.
Okay, one of the news sources out there, the Signal Tribune, put in their paper a plan for a better city or a power grab. Next month, Long Beach residents will have the power to give even more power to the current and future elected officials of the city, thanks to the 4 measures the mayor and city council have placed on the ballot for voter consideration. Now, the reason I think that that's truly significant, the Signal Tribune does not have a dog in this fight. This is not Long Beach. This is an outsider looking at our measures and recognizing the underpinnings of it, that in every case, we are giving more power to the mayor and to the city electeds. You want to add anything?
No, you did a great job.
Just to conclude, I think Laura and I are really proud of these measures. We think they're simple, they're straightforward, they make sense, and we're also proud of the group of folks that have come together from the beautiful city and the diversity of our community to support these. I'm proud that our former mayor, Beverly O'Neill, supports these. I'm proud that our former mayor, Bob Boster, supports these. I'm proud that we have many city council members supporting these, state legislative people, but most importantly, I'm proud that grassroots leaders that advocate at the civil rights level, at the grassroots level, support these measures as well.
Mm-hmm. Yes, and it's been a pleasure to be involved in this process. I really appreciate the passion that has come out with everyone. We all care about Long Beach deeply, and I think that's the commonality we all have at the table here today. We care about this community. We want what's best for the community. We have different perspectives, but I believe we can continue to work together, and I'm all about just helping make things more transparent, more involvement with the public, and to ensure that these things are continually, the conversation continues, and that we continually discuss these things out in the open and come to an agreement on how we can make this wonderful community that we love and care about better.
Okay. Thank you. And I'm just going to leave that there. So thank you to our live audience for joining us, and thanks again to our in-person guests and our live studio audience. Please vote on November 6th. If you need information on that, it's on our website, it's on the city website, and we at the Long Beach Post hope to do more events like this in the future. Please watch the video. If you weren't able to join us live, it'll be on our website and on our Facebook page and other social channels. So thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thanks, Melissa.
Sorry about the technical difficulties.
It worked. It all worked.
Yeah.